Welcome to the PlayCreate podcast. I'm Kirsten Gunnerud.
And I'm Jill Johnson.
So what are we going to do today on this podcast?
Well, last time we talked about the elements of improv.
Yes.
And we asked people to go out in the world and notice more, use everything, and let go.
Yep.
So I thought today we've kind of had one of my friends, Kelly Wolf, talks about breadcrumbs, and I think that a lot of people have used that, or synchronicities, or what keeps popping up. And I think when you're in that let go phase, there's a lot of moments where you notice how things are kind of correlating and showing up for you. Or, you know, it might just be that you're driving and you put on a podcast and it's just exactly what you needed to hear. Or, for example, we just went to one of our local yoga gals, and she started the class with what you wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And so I think, or it's just that alignment when everything's kind of going crazy and someone shows up or opens the door or calls you just when you need it, or just those moments that feel kind of like divine grace.
Yeah.
So that's what I notice when I let go and get out of the way. I'm not forcing things as much. And it's hard too when you're, you know, when you put it into the context of how lucky we are. I mean, we kind of live in a really privileged place where we can kind of play with these ideas a little more. I was listening to something this morning. I think it's Malcolm Gladwell that wrote Tipping Point.
Yep.
Yeah, and he just wrote a new one about more of the race issue. And I was thinking about when you're in moments that you can't get out of, and you're kind of boxed into how we are held into certain roles.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot of things that kept coming up with, how do we let go of like our ideas? How do we burn the teacher, as they say in shamanism, but keep the medicine, keep the lesson? How do we let go of our assumptions? When I walk into something, how am I already framing things? And then one of our good friends who always talking about Hope the Elder Speaks, but there's a big line in this poem that talks about letting go. It's time to let go of the sides of the river and flow forward. And so I just felt like let go is such a big one, but there's so many ways to interpret it. Yeah. So it would be a fun one to play into today.
I love that. And let go is one of those ones that sometimes you think you're letting go, but you aren't really letting go.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. I think you many times, and other friends, I'm sure I've let go of everything, and I'm sure that's not what's holding things back anymore. And then I find out there's 5 more layers of things I haven't let go of, where I still have an idea about something, or I still have my decision about how I want something to be.
Yes.
And so it's always an interesting thing to let go and just notice that.
Yeah.
And find a way to be open to that.
Yeah, I think when you were saying that, I imagine Shrek when Donkey's like, when he asks Shrek, he's like, well, I have layers, you know, onions have layers. Yes. Like, can't you be a parfait? But like, I think about letting go as layers. Like, I do think it's an ongoing process, which is hard because I know I just want to like let it go, move on, and think I'm done, and with so many things. But I feel like we can only let go of what we're ready for, and then we return to it. And it's just kind of an ongoing unzippering of layers. And when you're ready for the next one, it allows you're allowed, you know. I think about coming into business and what I thought I let go of, and then another week I'm like, oh, I'm letting go of that, and then yet another week I'm letting go of that. So I just feel like it's this ongoing process. It's never really done. But there are different ways of seeing it. It's just like veils, you know, you're taking another veil off.
Yes. And I just had this vision of, I forget why this came up recently, Like if you're gonna go jump off a platform, do a bungee jump, or you're gonna go skydiving, or you're gonna go, how the hardest part is taking the jump. And once you take the leap, how all that, everything inside that you're holding on to just goes away. Yeah. For most people. And it's not the actual act of doing it, it's the stepping into the act of doing it. And how we can, one of the things I work with people on is even as you're walking into a room, just taking a big breath before you go in there. And just letting go of whatever it might be that you're carrying into that room with you. And as you walk into a door, so using doorways as a metaphor or as a reminder of, okay, it's time to take a breath. And when you do that act of letting go and how that clears the space. And yeah, so even with the skydiving or something like that, how can we let go right before, like not just right before we take the jump or in taking the jump, but how can we start to learn to let go of some of those things before?
Well, and like today she's brought up the quote, and I'm gonna butcher it because I don't know, I didn't hear it, but it was about jumping from the nest. We have to fly from our nest. And I think about that a lot because sometimes I feel like there's there's probably more, but when you have a nest and it feels safe, sometimes it's easier to take the leap. But then sometimes there's something about not having that nest and not having a fail-safe that allows you to take leaps as well. Yeah. You know, like when I think about it in breakups, you know, when you have like one foot in one relationship and you're towing into another one, and you, instead of just really getting lost and just taking the dive into the water and getting wet, that's just a metaphor. You're still kind of going from lily pad to lily pad. Yeah. And so sometimes I'm curious about the nest. Like, it's sometimes easier to take that leap because you're like, well, I still have this here. Yeah. So I can kind of take this leap, but I'm going to be safe back here. Whereas when you're really pushed and there isn't another option and that nest doesn't exist, you know, it's kind of like I used to always say, take the leap and the net shall appear. Well, sometimes the net doesn't appear. Yeah. Sometimes you just fall and it hurts and you're like, well, shit, I was waiting for the net, you know, but in that doing, it does create some type of net. I mean, you're bruised, you're hurting, you might not be able to get up right away. But there's something about that too that I was kind of thinking about during our practice today was, well, sometimes the nest isn't there and you still have to take the leap. You still have to fly.
There's a school of thought that you don't take big leaps if you have a nest. That it's not until the nest isn't there, it's not until you have to go find or build a nest, that's when people rise to this higher level.
Yeah, and that's that let go. That's when you get really agile. And I think letting go is the idea of agility and being able to move with the current and not get so caught on what we think it should be, how we thought it should end up, where we're going. I mean, I think that's why we use the word intention more than goals. Right now is that, well, you can have goals, but your goal might change. So being open to what that might morph into. And so we put a little more energy into, well, what's the intention here? What's the feeling, taste, sound, whatever that you want it to be. And then be open, because a lot of times when we walk into the process, it changes in front of our eyes. You know, it's like when you're building a business, for example, you have all these ideas of what it's going to be, but then your clients might tell you something totally different. And it's up to you to be able to change with the market versus, and sometimes you're directing the market for sure, but you also have to listen. We can't get too lost in what we think should be versus what people are asking for or needing, or, you know, creating the content for us.
Absolutely. And that's where that letting go to the noticing more piece is so important. Yeah. So you have to let go of what you think it should be, and you have to notice what people really need. Now, they may not know they need it.
Yeah.
And that's where, listening to more than just what people say and paying attention to more of what you're witnessing around what they're doing, what they're needing, that they might not even be aware of yet.
Yeah, and also not having to fix it to make them aware.
Yes.
I think we're in a culture that's always trying to fix or readjust or, and a lot of it is just of the letting go is also letting go of what we want others to be.
Yeah.
And this is big in like relationships. Like, what do I want the person I'm with, whether it's my husband, my children, my friends, like letting them be who they need to be versus who I wish they would be, which sometimes, it can happen. It happens to all of us all the time, but being aware of those checks and balances, because a lot of it is not ours, and we try to make it ours, and that's hard, you know.
Absolutely.
Just always trying to be like, well, we got this. We'll make it just the way we want it.
Yep.
Fit into it.
There's something too about, I don't know that many people think about any of this as a process.
Yeah.
I think they tend to get stuck in, I guess maybe very loosely, but not really. And the whole idea of it is that process and being in the process and being in the experience of it and letting go and noticing more as part of that process versus, what is it? Everyone wants to get to the goal.
Yeah.
Instead of enjoy the process of getting there, right?
Yeah. Well, it's easier. I think it's easier sometimes to just stay in your head and be on the periphery. Once you step in, you're in. It's like that, back to that metaphor of the currents, like you're in it and you're going, and sometimes it goes faster than you want, and it really is a place of like letting go of control.
Yeah.
Because everything that you thought, all the planning, all the best laid plans, as they say, are usually thrown out the door. Like I think I don't know if I talked about it last time, but like when I was working in hospice, I had a lot of ideas of what grief looked like, or my own grief. Like I was coming in with my lens. Like if I was losing somebody, how would I be behaving? That lens changes. Like you can't walk into somebody's space with your own ideas and your own plan. You have to literally like have a plan, open the door, let go of the plan.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're walking into, and you don't know how others are taking grief and how others are dealing with loss, and that's not your job.
Yeah.
Your job is just to be there in that space, holding whatever needs to happen in that moment. And I think that's the hardest thing about letting go, is that you also are letting go of control. And when things feel scary, I know how I am. I am gripping. I'm like, oh my God, I need to figure this out. I need to fix this. I just need to be anywhere but right here, because I feel out of control.
What you have said in the past, which I think is such a powerful insight, is that when you are saying to yourself, I've got to fix this, is when you know
I'm in trouble.
You're in trouble.
Yeah, the figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to me, the first time I heard you say that, it was powerful, because what a thing to realize. And a lot of times that's part of letting go too, and noticing more, is noticing when we're tightening up around everything, and noticing when all of us is constricting around something, and noticing that, because if we can at least notice it, we can start to shift it. But if a lot of times we're not even aware of that. We just get so tighter and tighter and tighter and more focused on, I've got to fix this and I've got to change this and usually what happens is just more and more resistance comes our way instead of a shift.
Great example is like right now, like I feel a little constriction in my chest, which is always an indicator. And it's always like, and I'm like, oh, well, that's just like fear, because we're putting ourselves out there in a different way. And then I just like notice it. And I think when you say the notice more, noticing helps take the ammunition, the build up away, because instead of ignoring it, it's like when you ignore the screaming, like it gets just louder and louder and louder, or it's always there, versus like, oh, I've noticed this. It's here. And it takes a little bit of the intensity away.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing of noticing, and the letting go is just like, oh, it's okay to feel things as they come up. It's okay to be a mess.
Yeah.
It's okay to be like all over the place. And then it's also okay to be really doing well. Yes. You know, I think that's another thing, is that we put so much emphasis on certain things. You know, we always joke about how nobody is like, oh, you're so happy, we need to fix that. You should journal about that. Like, did you journal that? Did you go talk to your therapist about that? Have you really thought about this? Like, what are you doing about this? Like, what tools are you using? You know, no one's saying that to you when you're like, here. But the minute we're down in our gutter, everyone's shooting stuff at it. It's like, I think I was listening to Oprah talking to Elizabeth Gilbert when she was with her friend that was dying. And she said, when she put it out there, please don't send all of your best cancer like secrets. Like, don't send, like, I've gone to this doctor, I've gone to this, like, I've done this. Like, we just want to honor where we are. And I think it's hard because we do. I'll catch myself all the time when someone's like, oh, my back hurts. I'm like, oh, I have this great person, you know, like,
I do that too.
Yeah. I have this great thing, you know, like, because I mean, it's beautiful because we're compassionate beings. We want to help.
Yeah.
And then also being like, well, maybe in that moment they just want to be heard, or maybe they're okay.
So I have 10 million things running through my head right now. One is I don't watch a lot of TV, but I've fallen in love with a show called New Amsterdam.
Okay.
And it's about this doctor who comes in to run this public hospital and turns everything on its nose and runs a hospital the way he believes a hospital should be run. But one of the first things he tells his staff after he fires most of the ones who don't want to serve their patients is that the most important words are, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. And so he doesn't, and that's, I think, ironically, his way. It's based on a true story. And I'm guessing, I don't know this for fact, but that was his way of letting go. Mm-hmm. So if the first question you ask someone is, how can I help? Instead of, oh, I've got this and I've got that, and oh, we're going to fix it this way. Yes, what's wrong? Yeah. Therefore, what's wrong with you? Yeah. But just, how can I help? Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautiful, because it's not a yes or no question, mm-hmm. which shuts things down. It's an open question that says, I'm here to help. What can I do? And there's something powerful about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what was, that was one of 10
that was
million.
One of a bunch. So there's 3 big ones. We did this to my daughter the other day. Yeah. So we went bowling for my son's birthday, and she normally does a great job, and for whatever reason, because she doesn't have the rails up anymore, got her every time. And for 2 entire games, every time she went up, we had 10 million tips. Yeah. For how this was going to, get better. And of course it didn't, until we just started playing with her and getting her to smile and have fun again. Yeah. And then she started bowling great. And it is such a reminder again of when we're trying to fix something, oftentimes it has the other result. Yes. But when we just bring lightness to it, or openness to it, or space to it, it usually kind of finds its own way. Yeah. Well, and finding your own, when you were saying that, I think about golf. And if you're holding your golf club super, super tight, you are trying to control. Yeah. And if you have a looser grip, it just lets the club do its work. They always say, let the club do its work. Yeah. And it's with anything, let them do their work. Yeah. We are trying to oh, if you just try it this way, or just do it this way. And it's the same with art. I mean, we're in front of these paintings right now, and we can tell people all different ways of doing arts. And a lot of times, you start something and then there's a mistake, and then you find another way. And that's the letting go, is let the art tell you where you're going. I mean, you can get very specific and have these goals, and especially fine artists. I mean, it's beautiful to watch and what they're doing, but there's always those moments that
bridge us to something new when we do let go and make a mistake, and then we're like, oh, I would have never tried that.
Yeah.
I would have never known that if that whole spill happens, that this would have led to this.
You know the Oops book?
Yeah.
Yes, one of my favorite books. We should do a workshop.
Yeah,
A
beautiful
full Oops workshop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've done it with kids with epilepsy.
Yeah.
And it's, because a lot of times in that space, there is a loss of control at all times. So how do you rebound by what we call mistakes?
Yeah.
How do you rebound from what we call failures or what we perceive as failures? I think we're the hardest. I just think the human race as a whole is hardest on themselves.
We're good at it.
And then we just keep going into that spiral of what we could do better. That was a failure. Or then we get lost in that failure. Or we get lost in judging other people's failures. And it leads us to really dark nights of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it's that. I mean, as you can tell, let go is just, it's big. It has so many different implications to it. It's not just one. And it's in so many different ways of our life, from schedules, from what we want to see, even just like our aspirations for our kids and our families, and not to mention ourselves.
Yeah.
And having them, but then also letting them go.
I do a lot with youth sports right now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Is the expectations, especially we as parents,
Mm-hmm.
have on or for our kids. And a lot of it is so well intentioned. We want
Yeah.
them to have the best experiences and have the best opportunities. And of course, our child is a superstar.
Yeah.
And yet that often also creates some challenges that if we can just let go of those, our kids actually thrive and perform even better and have more fun in the process,
Yeah.
which can be an amazing thing. So you want to hear the third thing?
Yes, I do.
So the third thing that was coming to mind is one of my most famous visuals or favorite visuals that I ever found. I did not come up with this, but it's 2 circles.
Yep.
So more circles.
More circles.
Love
It's all
my
about
circles. Overlapping. And one circle is what matters.
Mm-hmm.
So what matters to me.
Yep.
And the other circle is what I can control.
Mm-hmm.
And you put them over wherever they overlap is what you focus on.
Yeah.
And so that's where your focus should be. Most of us have not let go of what matters to us, and we haven't let go of what we can control or what we think we can control. So we're doing that whole, both circles, and the middle usually isn't even happening.
Yep.
And if we can just focus on that little middle part, because it's much smaller,
Yeah.
we can actually have much, much bigger
So will you give an
impact.
example?
Yes. So my favorite example is when we went to hear the Dalai Lama.
Yep.
And he talked about how we all want to change the world. And we all want to make a difference in the world. And what he begged us to do, instead of looking at it as the world, and then we all have this massive responsibility to help the entire world. Instead, focus first on yourself, then focus on your immediate household, then maybe focus on your community, but it starts with you.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at, because it matters, the world matters, but we don't really have a lot of control over it.
Yeah.
What we do have control over is ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we matter.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that we matter. And so when we can focus on that little bit then affects our children, our husbands, our wives, whatever you've got. It affects our neighbors. And it's the little ripple effect, right? And it just kind of grows from there. So we can have a much bigger impact when we really get focused on where those 2 circles meet.
When you're saying that, I saw my grandmother, Grandma Ivy, and I asked her once about her marriage and how they sustained and thrived for, ever. And she always said, the first 30 years we were trying to change each other. And then after that we realized we just couldn't. Mm-hmm. And it got really good after that. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, like you can't all this work is inside. It's an inside job.
Yeah.
And if we can keep working on that inside job, the ripple that it has outside of us is really profound, because not only do we start to change, but even how we see things and show up to things changes, and then that reaction from others changes, and that is that ripple. It just keeps going out from there, you know. And last week Edie talked about calm trails, like what are you leaving behind? So when you look up at the sky, I know there's all these conspiracy theories about calm trails, but an airplane, like what do you bring into a situation, and then what are you leaving behind?
Yeah.
You know, are you coming in and just like, woo, you know, like bring it all up, and then you're just leaving so much behind you? Or do you really come in and then leave something that what is left behind?
Yeah.
In you know, I think we talk about so much about how we show up, but what also is what's behind us, you know, and that kind of stuff.
Do you think how you show up though affects what's left behind?
Yes, I definitely do. I
Yeah.
think they're definitely interrelated.
Yeah.
Always.
I think about one of my very first flight camp. There's this amazing woman. Everyone in it was amazing. But there was this one person, and what people talked about when we were just talking about the effects of flight camp later, was how she would show up to meetings, and just her presence in that meeting, because of how she had let go and because of what she'd done. And she was amazing before. It wasn't that dramatic of a shift, but it was a dramatic in her, but it was a dramatic shift on the impact she had on others.
Yeah.
So just her presence in a meeting could completely change the whole dynamic of the meeting, and could completely change how the rest of people's days went, because she set such an amazing example to the people she was having those meetings with. Because she always came in positive. She always reminded or was willing to be in the mess, even if it wasn't comfortable. And she always just she left it better than, as good as, if not better than, what she walked into every single time.
Yeah.
Which was powerful to hear and to witness that effect, and people noticing it.
Yep.
Like, it wasn't just that she was having it, it was that they were actually noticing the difference she made just by being in the room, because of how she carried herself and what she brought in there with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just an ongoing thing of being aware and being conscious, you know. I mean, it's like when you're driving and then you're like, how did I get here? Because you've just been somewhere else.
Yes.
How often are we just somewhere else?
Yes.
You know, even in this, like, we've really tried to consciously be aware of, like, okay, we're showing up and we're going with what we really have created this about, and using the tenets, and not, we're improving, you know, like, since that's our center, you know, we have a lot of little notes, but then we also, those could go out to the side.
Absolutely.
And change. So I think it's just how we can come in and be there.
Yeah.
You know, because you can tell, a great example, and I love my beautiful husband, Matt, so much, but he really wanted to see my dad last night. So my dad comes up and we're there, and Matt is just everywhere. And he's been sick, but he's everywhere. He can't sit down. Yeah. And after my dad left, he's like, wow, really couldn't be here. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, Jack and I were even trying to move around to get, like, we're like, okay, how about here? How about here? Yeah. And just noticing, like, oh, so many times we just can't even, and maybe we just can't. Yeah. And, like, even laughing at it and being like, I am just not here. I'm so sorry. I just can't be here. There's just too much in my periphery right now. And especially when there's trauma or stress, it's hard to be here, and it's hard to let go. The last thing I wanted to hear when I was struggling at my most was let go. You know?
Oh gosh, yeah.
So I think we're bringing up this idea of let go, that it's just a constant fine-tuning.
Yep.
Sometimes you can let go really big, and sometimes it's like letting go of what you thought you were going to get done with the day.
Yeah.
Or, you know, just letting go of, well, I can't even get out of bed. Yeah. But it's okay. I'm just going to let go. Yeah. So I think that was our big thing about starting this conversation about the let go.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what do we want to do? What do we want to let go of as we go on this week? I think for everyone, it's just noticing, let go, how they're letting go, big and small, and what that means and what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and noticing what you maybe want to let go of but haven't yet.
Yeah.
Kind of like Matt, like realizing I thought I wanted this, but I'm all over here, and okay, that's how I am right now.
Yeah.
And being okay with that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and not over processing. Like, we didn't sit down afterwards and I was like, okay, Matt,
yes,
tell me why you weren't able to let go in this moment to be with us, just being like, oh, well, that's what it was. And then move on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of let go, is the move on. Like, that moment in time wasn't what we thought.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
It's totally okay. There'll be other moments, and we don't have to fixate on it, because when we fixate on a point, once again, we're not letting go.
Well, and that maybe gave, I don't know if this is how it worked, but what I find with that kind of stuff too is usually it's happening for a reason, to a certain degree. So maybe you had more time with your dad than you expected because he was all around, or maybe it opened up a conversation you wouldn't have had if all of you were there. Or, who knows? But there's almost always some silver lining in it.
Yes.
And if we look for that, we can find it most of the time, or it eventually shows up. I guess the other thing I'd suggest to people this week is the layers, right?
Yeah.
Like, start wherever you are.
Yeah.
Like, don't jump to the big, huge, massive stuff you should let go of. Just notice what you're actually ready to let go of.
Yes.
And allow that to be all it is right now.
Yeah.
And just day by day, step by step. Because I think when we hear those words, and I know for me in my dark days, hearing that, I agree with you, was like,
Yes. She just flipped off the world.
Yes. But it was because I immediately went to, I have to let go of this massive thing I haven't even begun to deal with.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it, whether that was what was meant or not, versus what little piece of this am I ready to let go of?
Yeah.
Or what little piece of anything am I ready to let go
Well,
of?
because we want to fix it. We want it to be remedied right away.
Yes.
I mean, it's just our natural thing. We go to that moment of ultimate redemption or the ultimate success. But right now it's a layer, it's a step, it's a base hit, it's whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
It's just little fibers of being.
And that's part of being in the process.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
We're always in a process.
Yes.
Always. And but we always want to be coming out of the oven instead of baking.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
It's hard because it is, but then it doesn't have to be so hard when we're a little lighter with it.
Yes.
And letting go. So
yes.
I guess this week is all about just noticing how to let go.
Yep.
Maybe where to let go, and just moments of it where you can appreciate it. Absolutely. And what comes back to you. What things kind of flow in to you when you are not so focused on the outcome, control, fixing it, or figuring it out.
Maybe next time we can talk about the notice more side of the magic that shows up.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Because
that's a perfect segue.
Because what I notice, the more I let go, the more I can notice more, and the more so much of whatever it is that I need is right there on some level. And I call that magic. It's what happened today when I went into a yoga class I've never been to, and you've been to it, but she's talking about everything connected to why I started Rocket Trike, why I named it Rocket Trike, talking about learning to fly, getting out of your comfort zone. To me, that's magic. Yeah. It's one of those beautiful synchronicities that happen.
Yeah, and giving it that, because that's what makes us more playful. Yeah. We could analyze and be like, well, scientifically, let's look at, is it magic or was it just what you were listening for? Exactly. Or you could be like, wow, that's what I needed to hear right now. I'm letting go of what I could put and I figured out and just be like, that was really cool. Yeah. I'm going to give that a coolness quotient for a moment,
I love it.
Well, awesome.
So we're going to let go this week, baby steps, and peeling back the layers. And next week we'll talk more about magic.
Awesome. We love magic.
Yes, we do.
All right. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.